minutes.
Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Dallas Live. I am your host, Dr. RC. The number to call is 469-795-8580. Today, our featured guest is Adele Park, and she is an independent studio owner and has produced an audio book called When Marijuana and Reality TV Collide. X, another quirky audio book. So let's get right to it. Let's listen to what she has to say about this book.
Here in polygamous country, we always say, why buy the cow when you can get a dairy's worth of milk for free? I was enjoying a pleasant outing with some of my favorite wives when a band of hooligans zipped by. For days, rumors had been drifting across the desert that the compound at Gecko's Gulch would be the site of a reality show called Yikes. Naturally, I was curious, so I sent the girls over to work as maids. My brides came back with hair-raising tales about how the contestants on Yikes were smoking wacky tobacco, engaging in hoodoo voodoo, and allowing young women to cleave onto each other instead of their husbands. Something I would never allow my wives to do. This deranged behavior is laid out for all the world to hear in a production called Yikes, another quirky audiobook. Yikes is the story of Blue McKenna, a pot grower who gets involved in a reality show. Along the way, Blue hooks up with Randall Smoot, a member of the gay mafia, and Stephen Finch, a beatnik who spends his time developing a conspiracy theory involving a rock band called the Rectal Surgeons. And people think polygamists are weird? If you'd like to hear what these miscreants are up to, visit www.yikesaudiobook.com. Take the plunge into the heart of polygamous country in Yikes, another quirky audiobook. As we locals like to say, two's company, but three or four's a marriage.
Don't miss this wacky adventure.
Visit www.yikesaudiobook.com.
All right, Adele Park. Am I pronouncing your name correctly?
You are. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be on your show.
All right, very good. So we just heard the book is When Marijuana and Reality TV Collide. Adele, welcome to our program.
Hi, it's a pleasure to be here.
All right, very good. Now let's get right to it. Um, my usual question we ask all our audience, our guests, where were you born, and what did you do in the early part of your life? What are you doing now, and what's in the future for you? I know this is a loaded question. Try to answer as much as you can.
Well, I have a fairly simple history. I grew up in beautiful Boulder, Colorado, and after I earned my degree in humanities from Mesa College, I went on and launched a radio and TV career. And I worked in radio and TV as both a reporter and a news anchor and an on air personality for nearly 20 years. And then in 2008, I opened a recording studio in St. George, Utah called Straight to Audio Productions. And since I have opened my recording studio, I have produced two audiobooks. One is called Jitters, a quirky little audiobook. And then you just heard a little bit about Yikes, another quirky audiobook. And at present, I have actors working in the studio right now on a third production, which is called Gadzooks.
How do you spell it?
Gadzooks. And this
Gadzooks.
will also take place in the fictitious town of Naval, Utah, which is the setting for both Jitters and Yikes.
Okay, I understand the late night funny man Jimmy Fallon has put that book, do not read list. What does that mean? It's just a joke, I hope.
It is just a joke, but I thought it was great. I was in on the joke. I actually was the one that suggested to Jimmy Fallon via the internet that he put my project on the do not read list because, for one thing, you can't read it because it's not available in written form. It's only available as an audiobook. So please do not read Jitters. Buy it in audiobook form on audible.com or amazon.com.
Very good. So, ladies and gentlemen, as a matter of fact, I'm going to show our video audience the Aches, another quirky audio book, When Marijuana and Reality TV Collide. And this particular one, ladies and gentlemen, there are two copies available with me. And if you are the first two callers, you will get this audio CD free, and we will even mail it for you. So there we go. Ladies and gentlemen, number to call is 469-795-8580. 469-795-8580. And you are listening to Dallas Live. All right, Adele, let's get back to your this particular book here, the latest one. So what was the inspiration for you to write this book?
I write satire, and so I think that satire is sort of a writing form that involves exploiting the absurd. And so, what is more absurd than marijuana and polygamy, for that matter? Those are some of the subjects that I address in my audiobooks. I just think it's funny.
Hold on once again, because some caller already calling us.
All right.
Let's see what we have. All right, caller, you are online, Dallas Live. Go ahead, please. What's your name?
Hello, Dr. Archie. My name is Gene.
Hi, Gene. How are you?
Good.
All right, very good. Now,
I was calling because I heard I could get a free copy of the audiobook, and I was interested in hearing it.
Oh, well, if you can stay online or just check into live365.com/stations/Dallas Live 101 or /VR Chandran. My last name, and you can get this book. And this is actually an audio CD here, and by Adele Park. And Adele, tell Jean, how long did it take you to write this one?
It took me a couple of years to write it. This actually did start out in written form as a book. And I'm sure that the writers in your audience can relate to this story. I tried to get two of my books published as regular books because I thought that was the step in getting an audiobook. I thought it first had to come out in written format and then it could be an audiobook. Well, when I realized that it really didn't have to be that way, I just formed my company Straight to Audio Productions and went straight to audio. So this is not available as a book. It's available only as an audiobook.
Audiobook. Okay, Gene, are you still on the line?
Yes, I am.
Okay, do you have any question for Adele?
No, I haven't heard enough about the show yet, but it sounded like a really intriguing title, and I was excited to listen to it.
All right. So if you can stay on the line, my staff will get back to you and they will get your address and everything, and we will send you this audio book.
And
Oh,
Gene,
well,
I
thank you very
hope
much,
that it
Doctor.
makes you laugh and laugh and laugh because that's the point
Oh,
of it.
good, good. And I'm glad I don't have to read it myself. You'll read it to me.
Right. And in fact, I have a whole cast of actors that read it to you. All of my projects
Okay.
are full cast projects.
Okay. Well, that sounds great. I can't wait to hear it.
All right, Gene, stay on the line. We will put you on
Okay.
hold for a minute.
All right. Thank you.
All right, welcome. All right, Adele. So let's get back to this book. Now, I was listening to some portions of this. Let me see if I can get my video back. Okay, I was listening to some portions of it, and I see that you have a quite a good characters or number of characters that are actually acting on this particular one. And how do you put together all these people? And it looks like they are all professionals, not just some second or third grade or B movie. They look like they are done a pretty good job. How do you find these people, and how do you put together? I believe this is what you do for a living.
Yes, so I hired a casting director. His name was Gary Morris. He's one of the actors who is actually in this production and also was in Jitters as well. And he has been out in the acting community for a long time, so he knows a lot of actors. And we held auditions and we chose our cast. So now with Gadzooks, the majority of actors that worked on Yikes are now also working on Gadzooks. So we have kind of a nice little group that we have formed here in southern Utah, and we're having a lot of fun.
Okay, now what is that particular theme of polygamy and marijuana? What is the combination? How did you put two entirely two different things? And I also was very surprised to listen to the kind of characters that you put together. How did you come up with all this?
You know, I just have a random imagination, and so I think that comes out in my writing. And in terms of the marijuana and the polygamy, mostly the polygamous thing came about because I happen to live near a big polygamous community, and so I'm sort of interested in the culture itself. And so when I created my fictitious little town of Naval, Utah, where these stories take place, I gave it a polygamous background because, you know, it is in Utah, and this is a state where we had polygamy and still continue to have it today in some communities.
Well,
So I thought that would be just kind of amusing. I think it was sort of a different setting than most stories, and I thought people might be interested in that.
absolutely. Now, here is the problem though. Polygamy is not a funny subject though. But apparently you have been able to make into a funny subject, especially for the women. Now, apparently, you must have. Let's talk about polygamy because that's a very unusual concept, and the American Constitution or the laws don't allow such activity. A man having more than one wife. How are they able to get away with this?
That is one of the things that fascinates me the most. Now, I did not grow up in Utah. I moved here later in life, and I have been very interested in the dynamic that the state has with its polygamist constituents.
Okay.
It's a complex issue. You know, on the one hand, it's perfectly legal in our country to have children with as many women as you want and be married to none of them. Recently, what happened here in Utah that I found to be rather interesting is that a federal judge decriminalized polygamy because of that TV show called The Sister Wives. Now, if you're familiar with the show, it is about a man named Cody Brown and his wives. And the state of Utah was actually going after him for bigamy. And so he moved from Utah, moved to Nevada, and got into a lawsuit with the state of Utah. And it went through all of these different court hearings. And in the end, a federal judge decided that they would no longer prosecute people for cohabitation. That doesn't mean that polygamy is legal. It just means that's not an actionable offense as it once was. Now, in terms of why polygamy is allowed to continue, I believe it's because we pay for it. Um,
What do you mean? Who is paying for this?
well, most of the polygamists near Colorado City, where I live, are on some form of assistance from the government. Now, how many people do you know that can afford to have 35 kids apiece? It's just the math on it just doesn't work out.
Right.
And the other really big tragedy is when you're talking about the math of a polygamous community, if one guy is going to have 5 wives, and most communities are pretty evenly split in terms of men and women, that means some of the guys got to go. And what happens is these kids, they get dumped off, these young boys, they get dumped off in St. George, where I live, Las Vegas, and Phoenix and Salt Lake City, and they're sort of left to fend for themselves. And so we have a number of people being affected by this lifestyle. Um, but it isn't polygamy that's so bad. It's the crimes that go along with it, in my opinion. Um, Cody Brown, getting back to him, is kind of a classic example. The women that he married were all over the age of 18, which is not necessarily the case with many of the brides in Colorado City. If you watch the Warren Jeffs trial and you're in Texas yourself and you know about the situation in El Dorado, you have a number of very young children underage being married. Well, with Cody Brown, his wives were over the age of 18. These were not arranged marriages, and he pays for all of his own stuff. He pays for all his own kids, and he supports all his own wives, and they work. And so, in that situation, I'm not sure why we would call Cody Brown a lawbreaker simply because he's cohabitating with 4 women.
I see. For me, perhaps taking care of 30 children or plus may not be that difficult, but the idea of
You
taking
don't
care
sound
of
like a guy that
four.
has 30 kids.
Well, I don't have 30 kids, thank God, but even worse would be to take care of 4 wives. Let alone I cannot even handle a single wife. I don't know how I'm going to handle 4 of them. That's
Yeah,
pretty
yeah.
amazing. So in case of Cody Brown, you were saying that he was not subjecting himself to any type of assistance from the government, not on welfare, and he was taking care of all his 4 wives, and he was taking care of all his children, and there was no dole out from the government. And therefore, did that make his case stronger when we went to argue?
I'm sure it did. No, I did not hear the arguments. And it should be noted that there are many polygamists in Utah that do live and act and behave much like Cody Brown. You have different groups of polygamy that live in Utah. And I thought a fascinating read on the subject was by the author John Krakauer, and he wrote a book called Under the Banner of Heaven. And in that book, he sort of delineated between the different groups of polygamists in Utah. And so some of the polygamist groups are actually quite wealthy. They're quite independent. They wear modern day clothes. Their kids are in public schools. But that's not really the situation near Colorado City. It's a closed society. It's very secretive. And the people from Colorado City are the ones that are living in Texas right now in El Dorado. And I just recently saw in the news that the compound at El Dorado may be up for sale. I
Huh.
think the government may be taking over that property.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to Adele Park, our featured guest. Her latest book is When Marijuana and Reality TV Collide. And the number to call is 469 795 8580. Ladies and gentlemen, we will be right back. Adele, please stay on the line. And in the meantime, we will listen to some excerpts from this book.
Examine our navel. Part 3.
Every town has its haunts, those eerie places children dare each other to enter and adults avoid for reasons they can't remember. In Pitt County, Utah, that place is the Oasis, a small plot of lushness 10 miles outside of Naval. To the unsuspecting traveler, the oasis presents itself as a haven of gushing greenery, complete with the promise of shade and a hope of water to cool a dusty throat. Stepping into the oasis, the sun is blotted out by a filigree of towering leaves, and the temperature plunges to an unnatural degree. It is a misty, nervous chill, but things have started heating up on the planet, despite protests from the conservative right that global warming is nothing more than a whimsical myth concocted by former Vice President Al Gore for the sake of selling copies of his movie. Marijuana horticulturist Blue McKenna couldn't help but notice some not-so-subtle changes taking place in the oasis. Not only was the temperature warmer, but the color of the vegetation seemed to be fading. The tangle of ferns, Joshua trees, and flowering bushes continued to flourish, but the plants themselves seemed less vivid. More importantly, the cannabis Blue planted there was beginning to lose its razzle-dazzle. Chet Waterhouse, editor du jour, has no moral qualms about marijuana or those who use it. In fact, Chet Waterhouse has no morals at all. What he does have is an ungovernable...
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Dallas Live. I am your host, Dr. RC. The number to call is 469-795-8580, and you are listening to our featured guest, Adele Park. She has written two audio books, Jitters, and the latest one, When Marijuana and Reality TV Collide. And there is also, she's working on a third book. It's called Gadzooks. It's also happening at the naval base, naval Utah, not the naval base. There's no water over
No,
there.
but the hospital in Naval is called the Naval Base Hospital, so you were correct on that point.
Oh, okay, so I thought there is no water there, so how did they get a naval base there? But anyway.
That's the irony of it.
All right, very good. Let's get back to this the polygamy and having multiple marriage, and I have seen some of the episodes on reality TV and art and culture, and many different TV shows. One of the things that I noticed was, yeah, they have several wives and they produce a lot of kids. And when the male child becomes older, and then the competition starts. But the older men are much more stronger financially, and everywhere else. So what they try to do is to get rid of these younger teenagers out of their way, so that they are pretty much kicked out. Is that
correct?
Mm-hmm. All right, then
there's a term for that here locally, known as the Lost Boys. That's what they call them. The
Lost Boys. Okay, now I think that'll be very hard for them. Now I don't understand one thing though, but what is the psychology of the women who are willing to put up with this?
I really don't know, because I don't live in that culture and it's very secretive. So I really could not answer that question. I think we got a little bit of a glimpse inside the minds of some of the women when we were watching the trial of Warren Jeffs unfold on television. I don't think you can ever underestimate the lengths that someone will go to for their own salvation. So if you really believe that this is your pathway to heaven, you'll do whatever is asked of you. And so I think that this is a very deeply religious group of people, and they act in certain ways that are beyond my scope of understanding.
Okay. Now, you said religious. Do they belong to a specific religion?
Well, the polygamists that live near me in Colorado City, the ones that were headed up by Warren Jeffs, are commonly known as FLDS, meaning they are fundamentalists of the Latter-day Saints Church. Now, it should be noted that in Utah, the LDS Church excommunicates members that are polygamists. So that is no longer part of their doctrine. It was part of their original, in the inception of Mormonism, polygamy was practiced. At one point, they decided they didn't want to do polygamy anymore, and they began to actively get rid of people who were polygamists and not allow them to be members of their church. And so that's kind of where it stands. We talked a little bit about how the state has sort of a dysfunctional relationship with the polygamous community. I also believe the LDS Church does at times too, because on the one hand, they disavow this practice and they really don't want it associated with what they're doing today. but they can't escape the fact that it was part of their religion to begin with. So it's kind of a dichotomy for them.
Latter Day Saints is same as Mormonism. I understand, correct?
Correct. But today, the church prefers to be referred to itself as the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So the term Mormonism is sort of going out of vogue. In place of that, we refer to that community as LDS,
So
Latter-day
the
Saints.
yeah, so the Church of Jesus Christ for the Latter Day Saints.
Mhm.
I was under the impression I think you are right. I'm sure you are right that they actually abolished this polygamist practice many years ago,
Mhm.
and then now I think their goal is to have one man, one wife, and apparently there is this small fringe element still able to get away with it. Now, coming back to how they were able to get away with it, the case went all the way to Supreme Court. Cody Brown.
I don't think it went to the Supreme Court. A federal judge made this ruling, but it did not reach the Supreme Court. I do not believe that it got to that level. No.
What is the exact ruling finally came down that actually somewhat protects polygamy, right?
Yeah, I'm not really, I can't, I'm not a lawyer, so I can't exactly tell you exactly what the ruling was, but the upshot was that they were no longer going to prosecute people for bigamy. So it was a lifting of the cohabitation laws. So before you couldn't cohabitate with more than one person, and now that is not an actionable offense.
Well, then in that case, it becomes an actionable offense only when the first wife complains.
Well, I guess, and that doesn't really resolve the problem, but I do believe that just making it legal is one of the ways that some people keep the women in line. Because if you're deemed a lawbreaker, who are you going to tell about abuses and things that happen in your community? And really, up until a couple of years ago, even the policemen in Colorado City were polygamous. So women and children who were victims of crime had no recourse down there.
Oh my goodness. Well, that's a horrible story. But at the same time, um, it is I do not know because it is tough for these women. And at the same token, we were able to bring this out in a very interesting way. That's pretty good news. Especially, I was watching that guy on that little YouTube video, and where he is smirking a little bit about his about his action or his reaction to his own wives, and that was pretty funny, and it's pretty good. So
That was played by an actor, though, by the way.
yeah, it is an actor, right? I mean, I know though everybody is there an actor, but he's bringing out the Hollywood in your book there, so that's pretty good.
Yeah, and that was played by Steve Campbell. He was the narrator in Yikes,
Okay.
and he also has a role in Gadzooks. He will be old Doc Pinkerton, so he's one of my favorite actors. I love to work with him, and he has a wonderful audio voice.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I enjoyed listening to him. Now this guy, Blue McKenna, this is one of your books character, a burnt out novelist and a pot grower. Is a funk. He's in a funk. Now he says that he has 22 wives. So how did he? Well, let's just talk about him. How did he come up with 22 wives, and how is he managing this?
Okay, so you are referring to Joseph Stratton, who was a character I created that was the founder of my town of Naval, Utah, and he had 22 wives and, I don't know, 130 kids or something.
My
I
goodness.
just made all that up because I just wanted to have a big number. But
Right.
we do know that Warren Jeffs in reality had dozens of wives and hundreds of kids. So it does happen. I don't believe that most men in Colorado City have that many wives, but I think the further up the food chain you get, the more women you get, probably.
My goodness. Okay. All right. Now let's go ahead and talk about your next book, Gadzooks. Now tell me what this book is all about.
Well, if you didn't think that Jitters and Yikes were controversial enough, along comes Gadzooks. This is again going to be a satire, and we're going to talk this time about assisted suicide. It's kind of a hot button issue these days. We have an aging population, and while I choose to just see the lighter side of things, I do kind of hope in the end it sparks a debate on what we really consider to be compassionate end of life care. As you know, people are living longer and longer, but just because you're living longer doesn't necessarily guarantee quality of life. And so what's happening is you're having people that are on hospice, for example, for, up to a year. So they're taking morphine and they're having an at-home experience. Um, I happen to know of some people that really didn't want that prolonged experience. I had a friend that had ended chemo treatment and went home to die. And it was kind of a long process just for her body to shut down. And so while I'm not advocating killing people or even assisted suicide, I bring it up in a lighthearted way. And I hope that people will think about it and think about what they would like for themselves, their parents, and their partners when it comes to end of life issues. And if nothing else, I hope everybody gets their living wills in order so that people will know what their true desires are.
Somebody who is not on any type of life sustaining tubes or machines, but at the same time they are suffering from incurable disease and having a lot of pain and suffering. Perhaps they may be a great candidate for self-assisted suicide.
Well, this is the premise of my story for Gadzooks.
Okay.
So it takes place in the fictitious town of Naval, Utah. Everybody there is very religious, and they're just kind of anxious for people to meet God, so they get them there just a little bit quicker than normal people would. So again, I take a normal situation, I make it really absurd, I blow it up, and I turn it into something it was never meant to be, and I hope people will laugh at that.
I remember, Norman Schwarzkopf on the operation. What was the first Gulf War? He said that the Muslim army is ready to meet God, so I help them meet their God quickly.
I'm going to speed that up. So yeah.
Yeah,
So,
yes.
but in this case, in the case of Gadzooks, it's a joyful thing where everybody in town gathers around the person that's dying, and so the emphasis is placed on sending the person to God rather than mourning that person after they are dead and then having a big funeral. So it's just, again, it's absurd and it's very surreal and very out there.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to Dallas Live. The book that audio book we are talking about is the one I am holding in my hand, When Marijuana and Reality TV Collide. It's another quirky audio book by Adele Park. Very interesting listening, not reading, very interesting listening. And I think you can pop it on your radio in the car, and as you are driving towards your work or coming back from work, this is a very good read. You don't have to be actually typing something on your iPad or iPhone. It's better to listen to this. Ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to Dallas Live. I am your host, Dr. R.C. You are also listening to Adele Park. We will be right back. And Adele, please stay on the line.
Okay.
Drive combined with an urgent cash flow need. In the interest of time, Chet devised a plan to solve the two situations in concert. That's what a good editor does. With a head full of dreams and a shaving kit full of contraceptives, Chet Waterhouse set forth on a journey to the Utah desert.
Chapter 3. Chet Waterhouse.
I'm going fucking mad with all this mad fucking, I screamed at the early morning traffic snarl from my apartment balcony. I had just returned from an emotionally and sexually exhaustive trip to the Utah desert, and my fair city of Manhattan was ignoring me like a taxi driver in a rainstorm. No one bothered looking up to see me with my overnight beard and silk pajama bottoms. Even my shirtless chest failed to garner the attention of the women bustling down the street. Nothing short of a nuclear bomb could penetrate the morning rush hour here. I was born with a rather large penis, an instrument I have learned to play like a symphony. I have always had my pick of the ladies, but lately the demand has become overbearing. It took a cross-country trip for me to finally understand that I could, in fact, get too much of a good thing. Like my mother used to say, I've only got two hands. Guys like me often get a bum rap, and in my case, it isn't fair. I have always been honest with the women I've slept with, even when I was married. No woman can truly claim to have been deceived by me, with the possible exception of Sydney, my ex-wife. And it wasn't like I really cheated on her anyway. After the birth of our son, Anthony, I just couldn't picture her as a lover. To suckle at the same breasts as my son seemed dirty and perverse. Naturally, I began to seek more attractive outlets to plug into, something Sydney refused to understand. That was 14 years ago, and her anger.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Dallas Live. I am your host, Dr. RC. You are listening to Adele Park, and you just heard some excerpts from the book, audio book, When Marijuana and Reality TV Collide. It's another quirky audio book. Adele, welcome back to our third segment.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
All right.
And I think that you probably just played the most raciest segment of that entire audiobook.
Well, you know, we want
I think your audience is probably sufficiently shocked by now.
Oh, that's okay. I mean, our audience are not children. Our audience are adult people. I mean, whatever you have explained there, it's not that something that they have not heard or done or anything like that. So it's
well, hopefully none of your audience behaves like any of my characters. That wouldn't speak well for them.
Well, you know, if that part is the raciest part, I mean, it just happened. I mean, I randomly picked, by the way. I didn't go through the whole thing and then purposefully went then. Okay, let's put this one on the line. But I was really surprised when this came up just now, and I was listening to it. Oh, well, wait a minute. I didn't know that this is coming, but but it doesn't matter because this is an adult show, so it makes no difference. But coming back to Gadzooks. There was one person everybody knows, and he recently died maybe 3 or 4 years ago, Jack Kevorkian. Okay. Mm-hmm. Now, Jack Kevorkian was really the guy who went to jail for many years for promoting assisted suicide, in which he has actually helped people commit their commit their own death or commit their own suicide. And I think most of the time he was there in the room when they died, and that's why the government went after him and said, "Wait a minute, you basically murdering these people." Therefore, in Michigan they had a lot of interesting rules about this. Is there a character like Jack Kevorkian in that book, in the Gadzooks?
No, there actually isn't. So in the case of Gadzooks, it's more of a communal thing.
Okay.
It's almost part of their religion, and they have these big ceremonies where everybody gets together and says farewell to their loved ones. So without giving away too much of it, no,
yes.
I actually don't have a Jack Kevorkian type
character.
Yeah, but I do have one character who then the state figures out what's going on, and then they come after her. Uh-huh. So there is a female character that's going to be facing a little justice here in this story.
Okay, well, we won't go into it, but it looks like if this book is of any reference, all your books must be pretty good, and we are really looking forward to getting that one.
Well, I'll definitely send you a free one for sure.
Thank you so much. I will review it, and we will perhaps. How long do you think it will take for you to publish that audiobook?
So we started recording in October. I record my actors one at a time because they all speak in first-person narratives, and so we don't necessarily record in order at all. Right now, I am about maybe halfway through recording it, and I'm hoping that it will be out, well, probably in early fall, I think, is when it's going to be released.
Okay. Now, by the way, if you are looking for a character who does not speak American English, you have found him.
All right, good. Well, it's always better for somebody that can actually speak a real accent rather than having somebody fake one.
Yeah.
So I like that. So yeah,
I call myself a Bollywood accent. So.
Oh, Bollywood, yes.
Well, it's a joke, but don't take me seriously.
No, actually, that's good to know.
Yeah. All right, now, you said that you grew up in Boulder, Colorado, and you got a Bachelor's of Arts degree from Mesa State College, and then you spent next 20 years working as a television and radio reporter. Tell your experience as a TV and radio reporter. How was it? Where did you work? And you can name the company's name. It doesn't matter. Okay,
Okay.
and tell us who you met, what kind of characters, and who is the one that impressed you the most as you were reporting an interview.
Well, I worked as a general assignment reporter for both radio and television, and I did a lot of anchoring, especially in radio itself. I mostly did my work in Grand Junction, Colorado, which is the community where I went to college. So after college, I got a job and went to work right away. And in terms of who's the most interesting person I ever interviewed, that was somebody that I interviewed after I moved to Utah and I was working at KBRE up in Cedar City. And I came down to St. George and I did a five-part special on blind people. And I came down here and I met with these blind people and I spent oh, the greater part of the afternoon with these folks and they were so funny. I had the most joyous experience with them. They laughed, they made fun of their disability, they got around, they just were inspiring. And so when I think of an interview that really turned me on in some way, shape, or form, that was definitely it. It was just a really uplifting day, and it really kind of sharpened my own perspective. It brought a lot of gratitude into my life, made me realize how fortunate I am that I can see, but also gave me a little bit of hope that if something really debilitating ever happened to me, it's up to me to decide how to feel about it. I can still have fun. I can still laugh and be part of things. And so I learned a lot on that day. It was a good day.
Oh, okay. So, a five-part special on a TV radio station, and you are
It
meeting
was radio in that
radio
particular case. It was
radio
radio.
station, and you were dealing with blind people. But how many of them, roughly?
About 3 to 4,
Three to
maybe.
four.
And then the people that ran the actual facility, I interviewed them. So I talked to a lot of different people, but 3 to 4 people that could not see at all.
Really,
So
completely. They're totally
uh,
blind.
well, they would say stuff like, I would ask them, well, so what do you guys do for fun? And they'd be like, well, we watch the jazz, which I just thought was delightful, you
You
know.
know,
And
fun.
they talk like that all day. It was just really fun.
Funny and blind. That reminds me of a movie from Richard Pryor. Richard Pryor was in this movie as a comedian, and he was a blind man in that movie. He was sitting there and reading a newspaper, upside down, okay, in a subway train. And his sister walks in and in the next station, and she says, "Wait a minute, you are reading a newspaper? Well, what? You think you are a white man?" And he says, "Well, what do you mean? I thought I was white." Okay, of course he was born blind, so color didn't matter to him. So
Yeah,
that was an
right.
incredibly funny movie. Wow. Okay. So that's so in that particular job. So you said you were doing this radio reporting for about 20 years,
hmm
and
And I also did some magazine reporting during that time.
uh-huh.
I wrote for St. George Magazine and some other publications as well. And so I've kind of run the gamut as a journalist. I've had different ways to tell stories. And so, really, what I'm doing at Straight to Audio Productions is the same thing, only I'm telling stories that aren't true, but hopefully ones that are funny.
Yes, absolutely. Now, well, that brings up an important question. How did you bring, or how you were able to put your audio book Jitters, in front of Jimmy Fallon? How did that happen?
Okay, well, the Jitters actually has an interesting history. Besides being on the Do Not Read list, Jitters also has the dubious distinction of being a 2011 Audie Award winner from the Audio Publishers Association. So this is kind of a big deal. Every year, the Audio Publishers Association has a competition, and in the multi-voice category, Jitters actually won. Now, to put this into a little bit of context, some of the finalists in my category included The Importance of Being Earnest, and also a book by Deepak Chopra called The Shadow Effect, and
Hmm.
also Room by Emma Donoghue. So I had really tough competition. I don't know why they picked Jitters. I kind of wish somebody would tell me, but nobody has so far. So anyway, I had this great award, and I was thinking, how can I leverage this, or how can I get people more excited about my audiobook? And I realized that I have a quirky product, and so I need to be quirky in the way that I market it. So one night I'm watching Jimmy Fallon, and he comes on and he does his little bit called the Do Not Read list.
Do not
And
read
at the
list.
end of the bit, he says, well, if you have a title you'd like to suggest, just email us. And so I thought, oh, that's funny. So I just emailed him off and forgot about it. And really, it was a couple of months later. And Gary Morris, who is my casting director and also, as I mentioned before, an actor in all of my audiobooks, uh, emailed me and said, I saw you on Jimmy Fallon last night. Well, this was about 4:30 in the morning when I opened the email because I began my first editing shift quite early.
Uh-huh.
And so I'm thinking, oh, Gary, I hope you're not pulling my leg because I'm going to go wake up my husband and we're going to watch Jimmy Fallon because we always tape him
Okay.
because it's on a little bit too late for us to watch when it's live. And got up and sure enough, we were on, and there he was. He was lampooning my project, and I just thought it was uproariously funny. I was so grateful and delighted with the whole thing. It was
So,
great.
how much time did he spend on it, on the show?
Oh, about, I don't know, 40 to 60 seconds, which
Okay.
in television is a lifetime.
Lifetime,
It was
yes.
actually quite a lot of time. He played a little bit of it. He
Mhm.
showed the product, and yeah, it was funny.
Okay, very good. Um, Now, this brings up a most important question for me. Now, the first one, Jitters, a quirky little audiobook. Um, you must have produced at least several thousand videos or audio CDs, correct?
No, no, that was my first commercial product. Yeah.
Okay.
Um, I do know how to edit because I've worked in radio and TV, so I know how to edit both audio and video. Maybe not as good with the video as I am with the audio, but so I had some basic editing skills. The way I started out, my very first project was an experimental audiobook, and I did use nothing but a mic, a mixer, and a laptop, and I recorded an 8-hour audiobook. And then I decided, I'm going to build an actual studio. So I built a nice custom recording room. And the nice thing that's about audio today is that you don't need to have a lot of equipment to make it happen. Here you have your radio station that you're running in Dallas. You don't have to have a bunch of stuff to do it anymore. In the past, when I worked in radio, you had all these consoles and all of this stuff to manipulate sound and to play music. And it was just complicated. Well, that's not how it is anymore. And
Yes.
so what my setup is that I have, the actor in another room. I speak to them in a microphone on my end of things, and we communicate back and forth. And I basically manipulate the sound using a program called Pro Tools, which a lot of sound people use. And so rather than having, a big console or a mixer or something like that, I adjust and tweak the sound after it has been recorded using Pro Tools. And the wonderful thing about that is if you make a mistake, you just undo it.
Okay.
If you're using a console and you're adding bass or you're adding treble or you're doing something to manipulate the sound, if you're recording it that way, that's the way it's been recorded.
All right. Very
So
good.
the Pro Tools gives you an easy out.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to Dallas Live. I am your host, Dr. R.C. You are also listening to our featured guest, Adele Park. She has 2 books already published, Jitters, a quirky little audio book, and the second book recently published is When Marijuana and Reality TV Collide. Both books are available on Amazon.com, correct?
And audible.com.
And
And the second
audible.com.
one, the easy way to remember my projects is just the one word, jitters and yikes, because I have these cell lines, and I, so for jitters, it's when radio and polygamy collide, and with yikes, it's when marijuana and reality TV collide. So I'm just trying to give the listeners a little bit of an idea what they might expect here. So yes, expect a bunch of random stuff.
Expect a bunch of random stuff. Very good. Uh, Ladies and gentlemen, we will be right back. Adele, please stay on the line, and we will continue to listen where we left off from her book, some portions.
Toward me appears to have gathered steam, eventually taking on a life of its own, namely in our son, Anthony. Sydney remarried 2 years after our divorce, leaving behind the spice and vitality of Manhattan to become a bored housewife in a New Jersey suburb. Her second husband is the proprietor of a carpet cleaning business, an occupation so dull it pains me to even mention it. For entertainment, Sydney uses Anthony like a handheld grenade launcher, volleying rounds of ill will toward me and all of mankind. The weekends I spend with my son are nervous affairs, which leave both of us depleted, so it was with numbed shock that I greeted this morning's latest attack. Sydney started by informing me that she was getting a divorce, and ended with a sucker punch which entailed me taking Anthony for the summer. Sandwiched between were some strange remarks about Sydney needing to find herself, which I tuned out completely. Not to be outdone, I told Sydney I was leaving Pigeon Publishing in January of 2003, the second I finished the contract for the Moon McKenna books. My ex-wife, in her usual self-centered fashion, didn't take even 1 second to ponder why I would leave this high-paying, respectful job. Instead, she chose to focus on what really mattered: child support. Sydney's tone cut through the phone lines like a power surge as she threatened to haul me back into court if I was even 1 day late with her payment. When I was finally able to hang up, I took a moment to digest the news about Anthony joining me for the summer. It certainly put a twist in my plan to leave New York, something I'd been considering ever since those dirtbags murdered thousands of innocent people by crashing 2 airplanes into the World Trade Center. After reflecting on this senseless tragedy for several months, I reached the conclusion that dying is for cowards. It's living that takes real courage. Those fucktards responsible for 9/11 couldn't put together a decent set of balls between them. And what was it all for anyway? The promise of 72 virgins? As a man who has deflowered plenty of first-timers, I can say in all sincerity, it's far more satisfying to bet a gal who's been around the block a few times. I hope those slime buckets responsible for 9/11 contract the worst case of syphilis, times 72.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Dallas Live. That is funny. All right, Adele, welcome back again. This is our last segment. We have about 15 minutes. Two things that came to my mind, and as I was listening to this gentleman on your show talking about you on your book. Why people? I know this is just a philosophical question to ask you. Why people would think that they will get 72 virgins, after they die, whereas this guy says that he can get them right here on this earth. And
Well, I would think that you'd want to do the thing that was for sure, but I don't really know. So, I'm kind of throwing a lot of red meat out there. We're just trying to get a laugh. It's
very funny. All right, very
yeah.
good. Now, when you wrote the first book, of course, the jitters. When you created that book as an audio book, you have a whole lot of characters, cast, and a lot of expenditure. Now, the one expenditure that you would, as a business person, I would imagine you are doing it not only just for the sake of writing and audio books, but also as a business, you want to make money, correct? That's the
Of
plan.
course, yes.
Absolutely right. I mean, if everything else is good, but you have to make a living, or somebody has to make a living. How did you manage to spend all that money? You saved your money before we went into this project, because now you are an independent, studio owner, and you are doing it on your own. And did you save money? Because a lot of people on my audience would like to do what you are doing. Okay.
Well, I have really good news for people that want to do what I'm doing. They don't actually have to build an audio studio, first of all. There's a wonderful program which is a subsidiary of audible.com, which sells audiobooks, and it's called ACX, Audiobook Creation Exchange. And this is a meeting place for people who want to produce audiobooks, for people who want to narrate audiobooks, for writers who are looking for people that will voice their books, or studios that will produce it. Agents meet here. Everyone involved in audiobooks is meeting on ACX, and this is an opportunity to shop around and find someone to do your project that will fit your budget. So you can bid projects out. You can say, hey, I'm willing to pay X amount of dollars to have somebody do my audiobook, and people can respond and give you a pitch, and you can choose between all these different narrators. You can go on their site and listen to different people. It's just, I can't say enough wonderful things about it. As for my own personal situation, yeah, I did clear out my savings account, Fortunately, I'm in a situation where my husband was on board with my dreams and he was willing to come into it as a partner with me. Um, I'm learning as I go, so it's nice to have somebody that had a little bit of confidence in me. But this is something that anybody can do. That's the thing that's so wonderful about the internet. Here you are, you have your own radio station, you have your own radio show, you can talk to people all over the world. 10 years ago, that would have been really hard to do. The same thing is happening with audiobooks. And so not only do you have a great place to go to try and get your project done, but then if it meets the standards of audible.com, you can sell your book on audible.com. So you don't even have to produce a physical product if you don't want to. Now, I produced a physical product and I sell on both Amazon and audible.com. But for people that don't have a big budget, they can put together something relatively inexpensively and get it for sale.
Oh, okay.
So it's great news for people who are also audiobook lovers because there's a lot of stuff out there now for us to choose from. More and more titles are coming out every day. It used to be just the best sellers were available in audiobook form. That's not true anymore. There's all kinds of stuff to choose from.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, I was just doing a quick calculation based upon what I found on Google. People during their productive work life between the age of 20 to 65, they spend 25,000 hours sitting in the car just traveling back and forth from office. Average. Some people
Wow.
are more, some people are less. 25,000 hours each person. Most of the time, there's only one guy sitting there driving the car to work and coming back. So that tells me that anybody who is getting into this field has a humongous market. I know that many of my audience may or may not be able to get the Audi award from Audio Publishers Association, like what Adele Park was able to achieve. But I think it's a great opportunity for whatever you do in life, whatever it may be. Everybody has a passion. You don't have to write novels. You just write about yourself and put it as a book. I mean, that's the easiest thing to do, and perhaps. It may be a hit. You never know. The 15 minutes of fame can come anytime for anybody, anywhere in the world. That's interesting. So coming back to this same scenario, now are you profitable now?
I'm in the process of selling more and more audiobooks every day. So that's, to me, I believe in my products. I believe that they are going to be very successful. I'm just starting out though, so it's just the beginning for me.
So
But I have a lot of faith in what I'm doing for what the reasons that you just said, and also just because I'm one of these types that really believes that we were meant to do what we love to do, and if you're doing what you love to do, then you're on the right track.
absolutely.
And I
So
really love what I'm doing. I work with the greatest people in the world. I get to talk to people like you and talk about my projects. Um, it's just a wonderful thing all the way around. And even if people can't quit their daytime job, I would encourage them to follow whatever their passion is, especially if it's an artistic endeavor. If you're a painter, you can take photographs of your paintings and sell them on the internet now. There's just all of these ways to reach a worldwide market. So maybe you do have a niche product, but it's a big world, and now you have a chance to tell people about it. And so that's the really cool thing. Not everyone has to like your project, but surely
there's
there are
always
enough people
audience.
around the world that would make it viable if you could just find a way to reach them.
Right, exactly. So let's go ahead and make this even more successful for Adele. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm holding in my hand her latest book, When Marijuana and Reality TV Collide, Aches, another quirky audiobooks. And she has a very interesting single word promotional name for each one of these books: Aches, Jitters, Gadzooks. Very good, very good. Okay. Now, the last portion I want to ask you about is in this for this particular book that I'm holding in my hand. Um, did actually see I didn't go through the whole book yet because I'm going to read through this. Is there a is there any plot in this where marijuana and reality TV actually collide?
No, what you have is a bunch of kind of wacky characters that gather in this community of Naval, Utah to participate in a reality TV show called Yikes.
Okay.
And some of those people, including the person writing about the show, are into marijuana. So, in that respect, they collide. Um, just as with jitters, when radio and polygamy collide, what you have is a radio shock jock that goes to the town of Naval, Utah, stirs up trouble with the polygamists, and ends up helping one of them escape from an abusive situation. So that's kind of how the colliding happens. It's not a big head on thing, but it's just sort of a happy hookup, I guess, is a one way you could put it.
Okay. Now, in Colorado, I think recently marijuana became legal.
It did.
Yes, but it's not so in Utah.
No, and I wouldn't look for it to ever be legal in Utah. It's just not very likely.
Well, some of my artist friends have told me that they get a lot of inspiration when they smoke a couple of joint.
Mm.
Okay, now apparently, this legislature and government in Colorado thinks that's okay.
Well, I would say that from a taxpayer's perspective, there's a whole lot of tax dollars to be gleaned from legalized marijuana and from not going after pot smokers, putting them through the court system, paying for them to stay in jail. So, from that point of view, we know that Colorado is having phenomenal success in terms of gathering up tax dollars, but there are other problems associated with it. I've heard some stories about dispensaries not being able to put their money in banks because banks are nervous about it because it's still a federal offense. So our laws are not in alignment. So Colorado's kind of just feeling this thing out and trying to see how it's going to work. And also Washington State passed a marijuana initiative, and theirs will be in effect soon too, where it will be legalized recreational marijuana in Washington State as well. So I think if I were a federal government person, I would be working to try and federalize this because they're missing out on all the tax dollars, and it also leaves a weird patchwork of laws and how do you enforce laws or should you enforce them. The Obama administration did at one point go after medical marijuana dispensaries in California, the state of California. I don't believe they're doing that anymore, but it's just we need a cohesive policy on it, whether it's legal everywhere or decriminalized everywhere. But right now, I think we're in a bit of a quagmire with the whole marijuana issue.
Well, the marijuana is the same quagmire they have with respect to lesbians and gays getting married, because in some states it's legal and some other states it's not. Unless the federal government doesn't have the balls to actually fix this problem, and the states are doing their own thing. So that's another 200 years if this will all be squared away. I don't think you.
Yeah, but for a group of people that want money so badly that they would shut down the federal government over taxing and funding issues, I cannot believe that they're not on the marijuana bandwagon, because they can see that it's been a financial success in the states that have it. So,
well, the problem is in marijuana in Colorado, it was freely available, but once they legalized it and the government stepped in, it's in a significant shortage. So it's like
I
anything.
heard that.
Like anything else, when government gets in, now you can't find marijuana anywhere in Colorado simply because there's nobody to sell it. So whenever government gets in, something that was freely available now becomes hard to get. But anyway, Adele, it's been a 1 hour already passed. It's been a great, fascination and interest for us to listen to what you have done, and we hope you all the best. And let's show this book one more time. And can you also tell our audience, is there a website that they can go to buy this book, or is there a website dedicated for your books?
Well, you can visit my websites, www.jittersaudiobook.com or www.yikesaudiobook.com, or you can simply go to Audible or Amazon and type in Jitters or Yikes by Adele Park, and my site will come up.
All right, very good. Ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to Dallas Live. I am your host, Dr. RC, and we will be right back. Hello, please stay on the line for a few more minutes.